SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk has been taking very serious and impactful decisions regarding its space technology since the beginning. Recently, another decision was made that can impact all space studies in general. Wanna know what? Wait till the end. Hey people, welcome back to our channel. In this video, we'll be talking all about the recent changes and acquisitions made by SpaceX that will have a great impact on space research and exploration. But before we start, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment on your favorite type of vehicle in the comment section. Done? Let's get started. SpaceX was established in 2002 by Elon Musk with the goal of decreasing space transportation costs to allow the colonization of Mars. SpaceX develops the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch vehicles, several rocket engines, Dragon cargo, crew spacecraft, and Starlink communication satellites, to name a few. SpaceX's achievements include the first privately funded liquid propellant rocket to reach orbit, which is the Falcon 1 in 2008, the first private firm to successfully launch, orbit, and recover a spacecraft, which was the Dragon in 2010, the first private firm to send a spacecraft to the International Space Station, which was the Dragon in 2012, the first vertical takeoff and vertical propulsive landing for an orbital rocket, which was the Falcon 9 in 2015, the first reuse of an orbital rocket, which was the Falcon 9 in 2017, and the first private company to send astronauts to orbit and to the International Space Station, which was the SpaceX Crew Dragon Demo 2 in 2020. SpaceX has used the Falcon 9 series of rockets over 100 times. SpaceX is also developing a satellite mega constellation called Starlink to provide commercial internet service. In January 2020, the Starlink constellation turned to be the largest satellite constellation in the world. SpaceX also developed Starship, a privately funded, fully reusable, super heavy lift launch system for interplanetary spaceflight. Starship is estimated to become the primary SpaceX orbital vehicle once operational, replacing the existing Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and Dragon fleet. Starship will be fully reusable and will have the largest payload capacity of any orbital rocket ever on its debut. SpaceX has crossed many milestones and has adopted a lot of advanced technologies, earning its missions from NASA too. In the month of August, it made a very impactful decision. SpaceX acquired satellite connectivity startup Swarm Technologies for an undisclosed amount, its first acquisition in the 19 years of its existence. Swarm Technologies Inc. is a private firm developing a low Earth orbit satellite constellation for communications with Internet of Things devices using a store and forward method. An earlier investor of it was Craft Ventures. On July 16, 2021, Swarm got into an agreement to become a direct, fully owned subsidiary of SpaceX. They have a Federal Communications Commission license for low-bandwidth communication satellites in the low Earth orbit. In 2018, Swarm was titled the first ever company found to have deployed satellites without regulatory approval, after an FCC investigation into the startup's launch on an Indian PSLV rocket of its first 4 Pico satellites in the month of January that year. By December 2020, Swarm had launched 9 test satellites and 36 of a planned 150 low Earth orbit satellites to offer communication with IoT devices. In February 2021, Swarm stated that its commercial services were live using 72 commercial satellites, offering its global low-cost data to customers. The Swarm Tile is its satellite two-way data modem built to be low energy and embedded on the PCB of third-party products. Other products of Swarm include a data plan and development kit. Swarm gained some popularity in 2008 due to a conflict with the government. As a US corporation, Swarm was supposed to follow US space regulatory procedures. In April 2017, Swarm applied for FCC authorization for an experimental radio service license for its initial Pico satellites. The FCC rejected the permission in December 2018 due to concerns on tracking because of the very small size of the satellites, but they were launched from India the following month, as mentioned earlier. After the launch was reported, an authorized April 2018 launch of other satellites was suddenly delayed when FCC authorization was withdrawn. FCC investigation found that not only had Swarm launched the 4 unauthorized satellites, it had also illegally transmitted signals between them and Earth stations in Georgia. The investigation also found out that Swarm had performed many other equipment tests before the launch without required FCC permissions, including between weather balloons and ground stations. Industry reaction to this was highly negative. fearing not only disruption from such activity, but also further future regulation. Spaceflight Inc., which had arranged the Indian launcher's rideshare, amended its processes to check that customers had the proper licenses. The settlement needed Swarm to pay a penalty of $900,000 and to follow a strict accordance plan to prevent future violations. This included submitting extra details to the FCC at least 45 days before a planned launch for the next 3 years. While it was noted that the fine was still small, it was raised from an initial amount agreed between the company and the FCC Enforcement Bureau. An FCC commissioner saw that the negative publicity would probably prevent repetitions by Swarm or others. Swarm satellites now cover the entire planet as the Earth rotates below their orbital planes. Once they've launched their full constellation, Swarm will have at least 3 satellites covering every point on Earth at all times. Swarm has associated with Leo Labs to track their satellites. They've also made facilities to watch them live and stay tuned as they deploy 150 satellites in the next year. Their satellites have an ultra-sensitive communications payload that's completely integrated into the satellite bus. The satellites also have circularly polarized antennas that are tuned for communications. Swarm also designs and builds all its hardware, software, and protocols for its satellites and user modems. Even the working of Swarm is interesting. Data flows from the customer device to a Swarm tile, then to a Swarm satellite using their proprietary protocol, which makes sure all devices can send their messages in an orderly manner. Every hop-level transmission is also acknowledged. Each tile can store 2,000 unsent user messages, and the Swarm network is a store and forward system, and the satellites can store 4,000 messages. The satellites then transmit the customer messages to Swarm ground stations. As there's generally a station in view, messages can be sent properly. Messages are quickly relayed from the Swarm ground stations to the Swarm backend servers through a protected internet connection. The messages are then accessible to customers through various access methods, including RESTful, API, or webhook. The Swarm network is two-way, with end-to-end AES-256 GCM encryption, which is optional. Swarm has multiple applications like improving agricultural efficiency and decreasing waste by keeping IoT devices connected in even the most rural locations, solutions to connect more devices and gather more data no matter how far out to sea they are, etc. SpaceB is a constellation of Pico satellites predominantly intended to reach a quantity of 150. SpaceB test models 5 to 9 were bigger to assuage concerns about radar tracking. Swarm's website indicates that the satellites have a mass of 400 grams and measure 110 by 110 by 28 millimeters. Swarm got $25 million in August 2018 and launched its flagship product, the Tile, which is a small modem that can be embedded in various connectivity devices and linked to the satellite network as mentioned earlier. Swarm runs a constellation of 120 sandwich-sized satellites, as well as a ground station network, as per reports of TechCrunch. The deal would transfer control of Swarm's ground and space licenses to SpaceX, in addition to any licenses pending before the commission, the report indicated. Swarm's services will benefit from the better capitalization and access to resources available to SpaceX, as well as the synergies associated with acquisition by a provider of satellite design, manufacturer, and launch services, the company said in a filing in the US. SpaceX was to similarly benefit from access to the intellectual property and expertise developed by the Swarm team, as well as from adding this resourceful and effective team to SpaceX. SpaceX's Starship last week officially titled the world's tallest rocket. At around 395 feet tall, the spacecraft is the tallest in the world. Starship is to take humans beyond Earth to places like the Moon, Mars, and beyond. NASA has given SpaceX its Human Landing System contract for a version of Starship to land astronauts on the lunar surface as part of its Artemis program. Since Swarm's constellation and Starlink work in different frequency bands, the revenue generation method from the Swarm constellation is not clear for SpaceX apart from gaining staff expertise. However, Crunchbase states Swarm has less than 50 people on staff, a small amount of SpaceX's estimated employee base of nearly 10,000 people. SpaceX Swarm mentioned in the filings it will benefit from access to the intellectual property and expertise developed by the Swarm team, as well as from adding this resourceful and effective team to SpaceX. For Swarm, the merger will bring it to the deep-pocketed SpaceX after raising around $28 million independently in funding, as per Crunchbase. Swarm services will benefit from the better capitalization and access to resources available to SpaceX, as well as the synergies associated with acquisition by a provider of satellite design, manufacture, and launch services, the FCC filings mentioned. The Space News Report showed that during a webcast in March, Swarm Technologies said the $25 million they'd recently raised in Series A funding was enough to launch its planned network of 150 satellites. With that, we've come to the end of the video. Let us know your thoughts on the Cybertruck in the comments section below. See you again with another exciting video. Until then, bye.